Hello, manifestations of my nightmares. With New World basically imploding and Lost Ark not really filling that void for more than a month, Ashes of Creation has been eating up a lot of my thoughts lately. I always find myself looking for some sort of update or news about the upcoming Alpha 2, and I know I'm not alone on that front. Luckily, the devs are pretty open. They even do a live stream every month to give updates to the community, which is great, but watching the whole thing for the small amount of relevant information given feels like a waste of time. But fear not, I watched it for you, wasted my own time, and I'll just summarize everything for you now. First up, the combat revamp. Steven Sheriff, the creative director, said they've made amazing progress, but don't want to show anything yet because they're worried that any small bug or glitch would give a massive negative impression of the game overall. He also briefly mentioned in Assassin that dual-wield staggers, something that wasn't playable in Alpha 1. Next up is crafting. Steven mentioned the entire system was going to be vastly different from Alpha 1. He emphasized that in Alpha 1, the crafting was very simple, but in Alpha 2, they'll be implementing more of their complex ideas. Later in the Q&A, balance and crafting came up, and he took this time to explain that balance wasn't really their focus, at least not yet. He also mentioned that 22 professions were in the game, and the team's goal was to have all of them interconnected in some way, so that no profession felt like it stood out from all the rest. Additionally, he clarified that while a single character could use all professions, they would only be able to have complete mastery of 2 or 3. 2 final points on crafting. First, a brief mention of surveying, which Steven called a component of gathering that's vastly different from anything else in other MMOs, but provided no other information about. Then he briefly talked about how gathering resources would impact the environment they were gathered in. His example was that gathering too much of a given resource might cause the land to generate that resource slower, which would force gatherers to move on to a different spot. He said this feature should be prototyped for Alpha 2. Now on to the main topic of the stream, events. Most of the info seemed pretty standard. They want events to react to player activity, they want them to feel immersive, meaningful, all that crap. More specifically, Steven mentioned that events as a whole are broken into 2 main categories: calendar events and triggered events. Calendar events are exactly what they sound like, an event on a specific date and time, like Christmas or something. Margaret took this time to mention that based on community feedback, the events would include a mix of both real-world events, like real-world holidays, and game-world specific events, such as lore-based holidays for each race. Steven stressed that they really wanted to avoid these events breaking immersion. The example he gave was a possible Christmas-themed event, but he mentioned that there wouldn't be anything like Santa Claus running around. Finally, a commenter asked how they would align the events with the real world, as game time has already been explained to move faster than the real world. To this, Steven said more than likely they just wouldn't line up correctly. Triggered events seem like they'll be the more common event type. These include your standard things like a goblin raid on a town, but some other examples given were pretty out there for an MMO, such as a massive plague or a natural disaster. The goal of events in general was to give the world life. Steven stressed that the clock was always ticking, and new events would always be happening. He also hinted that bad things could happen if they were ignored, such as more impactful events down the road. On the more unique side, he also mentioned that monster coins could be used to allow a character to do an event from the monster's perspective, and not all events will be trackable by the UI in a window. His example was that you might hear a tree falling down while exploring, and investigating the source of that noise might start an event for you. Next up was environment. They showed some concept art of different racial housing, but the big reveal in this section was seasons. They had a brief visual teaser, shown on the screen now, and Steven explained that they wanted seasons to have an impact on gameplay as well, such as crops not being able to grow in some climates in different seasons, which would force players to get these crops from areas they could be grown in. Before the Q&A, they showed some new character art, including the concept for a scorpion boss. All the art's on the screen now. The Q&A only had a few juicy tidbits in it. First up, they confirmed that emotes interacting with pets and mounts was a thing. Then they said if your ship is lost at sea, your only real option is death. Steven said this is because they want real consequences for losing something so important. Finally, when asked about keeping Tier 1 and Tier 2 mounts both relevant, he mentioned the stable system. He kept it pretty vague, because they don't want to reveal everything about it yet, but apparently your active mount is determined by what you have stabled in that area. And as for staying relevant, the mounts each have different situational abilities, so you'll need to choose the right one for the right situation. Also, your mount can apparently be killed in combat, but they do seem to be able to be brought back, and I assume they'll elaborate on that later. And that's it. Steven mentioned early on that he was excited because of their internal town hall. Maybe I'm just being overly optimistic here, but I'm hoping that means that we might get news for Alpha 2 pretty soon. Either way, that's it. If you want to pre-order Ashes for the Alpha and Beta keys, I'd appreciate it if you use my link or code. Both are below. Leave any questions you have in the comments, do any of the other YouTube stuff you like, and I'll see you all eventually.